So I'm here with Donald Robertson, somebody who's been absolutely central in the modern Stoic movement. I got a nice chance to have a sit down with him after Stoicon, Stoicon X, all of the travel involved. Donald organized it this year. And actually one of the first questions I want to ask you about almost seems a little life hacky sort of thing. I know a lot about the sort of schedule that you keep in part because of our involvement. And I'm amazed. I'm a busy guy myself who gets a lot done, but I see you getting way more done than I do. And every time that I see you, you don't look haggard or totally worn out or anything like that. So how do you do it?
How do I not look worn out? How do I get a lot done? Maybe those are two different questions. How I get a lot done is that, I think there's two answers to that. One, the stuff that I'm doing, I feel like I do spend most of my time doing my hobby. So I just really love the stuff that I'm doing. It doesn't seem like a chore to me. So I'm kind of like thinking about Stoicism, when I'm eating my muesli in the morning and, when I'm walking down the street. So there's more thought and energy goes into something that, for want of a better word, is a passion and that you love than there would be if you were just doing a chore. So I'm lucky to be able to do my hobby for a living. And so I naturally invest more time and energy in it. But also I often will have, from doing cognitive therapy, we have activity schedules. So in the morning I'll print out a little form that I created, and it has a separate box for each hour of the day, and I'll plot roughly what I'm going to do. So the first hour is usually answering emails and kind of planning things and stuff. And then what am I going to do in the rest of the hours? And then I try and keep track of how I'm spending my time throughout the day and do the things that I plan. And generally what I find is that it's impossible to do what I want to
stay on track.
Yeah, it's impossible to stay on track, and I usually overestimate how much I'm going to get done. So I learned to be a little bit more forgiving on myself by doing that, because I realised, maybe I was setting unrealistic goals each day for what I thought I could do. And answering my emails maybe actually takes longer than
it always takes longer.
So that, and then in terms of not being too frazzled, the funny thing is that because a lot of people that are into Stoicism talk about taking cold showers. And cold showers and coffee are what get me wake me up in the morning. There's no way I would have been able to get through past 2 days if I hadn't had a freezing cold shower when I got out of bed, because we were both a bit sleep deprived and stuff. That was what kind of I feel almost like it tricked my brain into thinking that it wasn't as tired as it actually was.
I suppose that once it becomes winter, going outside for a couple minutes could work as well.
Yeah. Especially in Nova Scotia.
I was going to say, up by you. Well, over by me too in Wisconsin. It wouldn't work down south, but so you got into Stoicism a long time ago, but you were doing it primarily, if I remember right, through cognitive behavior therapy first, or am I wrong about that?
Pretty much, more or less. I got interested, as far as I can remember now. It's a while ago, so I struggle to remember a little bit. But the first part of the story is that, like everyone else tends to say, there was a notable omission in my philosophy degree. No mention of Stoicism, right? And so I finished university, and I spent 4 years. You do 4 years in Scotland studying philosophy, and none of these things are kind of really satisfying me somehow. The closest I found was existentialism, that seemed to offer a kind of philosophy of life, but it was also overly complicated and obscure, and not really much of a guide to create your own values. I didn't offer very concrete advice sometimes. So in the popularity, existentialism was kind of faddish. It lasted a few decades, and then it kind of fizzled out as well. So it didn't seem like the best option, and so I didn't really have an answer. I wanted something from philosophy, and I wasn't really finding it. And I was finding it a bit in Buddhism, but I also felt that there was a gap for something that was more consistent with my interest in psychotherapy and self-help, and kind of more familiar to the Western philosophical tradition than Buddhism.
Yeah.
Buddhism seemed a bit exotic to me. I guess I was reading some Oriental texts like the Tao Te Ching and the Yi Jing.
Mm-hmm.
The Book of Changes is a good one. Like, I was reading that thinking, this is kind of cool, but I've also got no idea what it means.
Yeah, or how to apply it.
Yeah, I read the Tao Te Ching and it said ruling a state is like frying small fish. And I thought, maybe it is. Maybe I have no idea what that actually means. Maybe someone could explain it to me. But I was kind of scratching my head a lot of the time and thinking, there's some good advice in here and there's a lot of really obscure stuff that it just puzzles me. So I think I stumbled across Stoicism by accident because actually I was reading about Neoplatonism. And maybe because I'd been interested in Heidegger. I'd studied Heidegger as an undergraduate. And I'd kind of got into Neoplatonism a bit, and I was reading Haddo's book on Plotinus, and from that somehow, maybe it just inspired me to read what is ancient philosophy, and philosophy is a way of life, and in reading those I realised of the different schools of philosophy. Pierre Hadot talks about cynicism, scepticism, Platonism, and Stoicism. It was really Stoicism that jumped out and seemed like the main one that he should have been focusing, like the main one that had a therapeutic dimension, the main one that had spiritual exercises. And when Hadot said, here's a bunch of spiritual exercises, it kind of baffled me in a way that he framed it in theological terms, because I thought, clearly these are what we would call psychological exercises.
Very practical, yeah.
And it seemed really easy to me to say, he's kind of given us a list of them.
Yeah.
And to draw up beside that a list of cognitive behavioural therapy techniques that correlate with them. And I thought, why has nobody done that? And like many books get started because somebody thinks, has someone not already written a book about this?
Yeah.
It seems like an obvious thing to do. It seemed easy as well. I thought, all I'm really doing in a way is kind of commenting on work that Hadot has already done. Although it turned into a bigger project than that once I started on it.
Yeah, in our conversations, it's become clear to me that you, in effect, besides all the other things that you are, you're in effect a historian of ideas when it comes to psychotherapy, and particularly to the cognitive revolution and anything that's remotely like Stoicism. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you, so we have REBT and CBT people that get involved in the modern Stoic thing. Some of them speak at Stoicon. Do you think that there's an awareness in the larger CBT community about these parallels between Stoicism and any sort of cognitive approach?
Yeah, it's a funny one. I kind of feel in a way that I should somehow be responsible for.
Well, because of your book, right?
Yeah, like introducing more people to it, but there's a kind of awareness, but not as much as there should be. They occasionally meet CBT practitioners that are into Stoicism, but they don't seem any more prevalent among CBT practitioners than there are in general. There's a bunch of the REBT practitioners I think had maybe stumbled across my book or other things and made the connection stronger in their minds.
Yeah.
But the other more Beckian CBT practitioners, not many of them have read this stuff.
Do you think that's because, you see this in a lot of professions, you see sociologists who are sort of unaware of the history of their discipline, right? Or you see this a lot in business theory. Do you think that's the case for CBT practitioners? It's not that they're just disinterested in the history, but they're not getting exposed to it, perhaps?
Yeah. They see. You said that what I do is like history ideas. The funny thing is that is kind of how I always thought about what I was doing. It was more about the history of ideas than philosophy or psychotherapy. The stuff that was my main interest in that I was writing about. The philosophy of CBT that book is mainly really history of ideas, and CBT practitioners are the focus of their training generally is on being evidence based and basing what they do on modern research.
Yeah,
and
right.
So there's a kind of implicit value judgment that older stuff is obsolete or non-evidence based, and therefore you have to be a little bit wary of getting involved or looking into it in too much detail. It's, all that really matters is where's the evidence for that. CBT practitioners initially trained their clients to ask the question, where's the evidence for that, where's the evidence for that? And the practitioners also kind of have that mentality when it comes to looking at therapy techniques, particularly in Britain, I think, where it's part of the NHS. There's an increasing expectation that therapists will justify what they're doing.
Yeah.
And that maybe is one of the things that discourages them a little bit. But exactly, you're right that, in my experience, CBT practitioners in particular often know very little about the history, not only of psychotherapy, but often they know very little about the history of CBT.
Yeah, their own tradition.
Yeah, a lot of them know very little about Albert Ellis, for instance, or behaviour therapy even, and let alone other forms of psychotherapy. Or if they do, it's just like a little smattering of knowledge that they've been exposed to. And in general, psychotherapists, the notable exception is Albert Ellis, who knew a lot about the history of his own field. He was really into the history of ideas. He was a nerd in a way, in a good way, about the history of psychotherapy. But that's unusual. Most authors in the psychotherapy field seem to have very little to say about it.
Yeah, you mentioned CBT really matters in a way. I mean, not just because it can help people, but because in Britain it's become part of the medical establishment. I think here in the United States it's one of the most popular forms of therapy as well, because it has demonstrated effectiveness. I don't know what the case is in Canada or in other places.
Yeah, I feel like in Canada it is popular, but not quite in the same way. There's also the issue of whether insurance companies will pay for a treatment, and I think probably maybe the situation's a bit different in different countries, but the insurer might say we're not paying for this therapy unless it's evidence based.
Yeah. I think that's part of what took place in the United States.
Yeah. And in Britain, if you go to an NHS practitioner, then they'll only refer to an evidence-based treatment, which doesn't mean only CBT.
Yeah. But
99% of the time or something, 95% of the time it means CBT.
One of the things that you said in a conversation that we had a while back, and you said it in other places too, is that the Stoic texts have an advantage over classic works of CBT, like the Burns Feeling Good, which people do hand out. Go to a group and they'll give you a copy, and people have it and they put it on their shelf, but they don't take it down and reread it. Whereas Seneca's letters or Epicurus's discourses or the meditations, people will read those their entire life. So that you saw that as an advantage to the Stoic literature.
Yeah, it matters. Like rhetoric matters, language matters, because the Stoics realise this. And I don't mean to maybe it sounds a little bit kind of like disparaging of modern self-help authors, but they're not. Comparing them to Seneca would be like comparing them to Shakespeare or something. Like, Seneca is one of the finest writers of antiquity. Yeah. That's why his works survive.
Yeah, because it was actually monks that were preserving them for a long time.
So it's hard to compete with that, right? To be fair, and sometimes I say it's like self-help written by Shakespeare or something. In that respect, it's a literary giant that has written a kind of self-help literature. So modern self-help authors write some good books and they have some memorable sayings, but the Stoic writing, people have taken to heart and read and reread for many centuries. Maybe in some cases, throughout history or going back to the time they were written. And that's important, I should say, because I think the Stoics really realise this, and it's strangely not something that's highlighted in cognitive therapy. Although it seems like common sense, if you have a teaching or a saying, it has to be memorable and it should be emotive if it's going to have an impact. Yeah. Right? So as a therapist, I think in therapy sessions, I come out with some very profound and insightful things, Greg, and then my clients come back next week and they don't remember me saying it. Yeah. Well,
myself as a teacher and then working with clients in other respects doing coaching, it's usually when I use a metaphor that they come back and say, true. I remember this because, and one of the things, we see Cicero complaining about the Stoics that they don't use enough rhetoric, right? That it's too unvarnished and he's going to fix it in the Stoic paradoxes, but by the time that we get to the guys that we're talking about, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and Epicurus, there's metaphors all over the place.
Yeah, they use a lot of metaphors. And I mean, some of those maybe have a special relationship with the Stoic tradition. Like I talked yesterday about the references to dying things. There's quite a lot of references to colour and dyeing in Stoicism.
Yeah.
And like dyeing with ink or dyeing with dye.
There's plenty of dyeing.
There's a lot of other sort of dyeing as well. Like ships. Although like some of these are
Epicurus says you get on the ship, you pick the sailors, you pick the time, but now you're embarked. Yeah.
Actually, funny you should say that. Just as an aside to that, I really feel there's a kind of gap in the market, for want of a better way of putting it, for a book about metaphors in Stoicism. Because you could easily fill a book with that.
Yeah,
and I'm a big believer when we're working with classical texts and we're kind of trying to reconstruct to some extent.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that helps us a lot is approaching the subject from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And I did that recently in the course that I wrote about Marcus Aurelius, because I thought, what happens if we try and teach Stoicism, but do it by focusing on the personality and the biography of an individual, rather than just like more doing it like academic philosophy.
Right.
So what happens if we look at an example of a role model and taking into account what he said, but also what he did. And then the whole thing shifts. It takes on a very different flavour, because when we read the Stoic books, people ask questions like, aren't they unemotional, aren't they passive?
Right.
But then when you look at a role model like Marcus, those questions don't make sense.
Yeah.
Like, because in his letters to Fronto, he could be more effusively...
And he's struggling with some of his emotions,
yeah,
too.
he talks about struggling with his emotions. Suddenly it paints a very different... It puts a human face on Stoicism.
Yeah.
It makes it more rounded and humanised. And I think when we look at... If we were to look at the metaphors that are used in Stoicism, I think that would allow us to look at it from a very different perspective and reconstruct it in a different way that might address some of the misconceptions or restore a certain balance to it. But some of those are cliches in Greek philosophy and literature, like this idea that the soul is a ship and sailing in troubled waters and all that is just a common metaphor.
A common place,
Yeah, and the philosopher is a physician or a doctor, or philosophy is athletic training, or military, the military life. These are kind of cliches, but some of them are particularly resonant with Stoics.
The one that I like in particular with Epicurus is, going to the philosophers is like going to the doctor's office, expected to hurt, all that sort of stuff. And if you think about it, for a lot of our younger audience, when they go to the doctor's office, they don't generally have that experience. I mean, with our age, right? We had bad tasting medicines still. Now all the medicines taste wonderful, and they give you a shot for everything to numb it first. And, we have to do a bit of explaining in order for the metaphor even to work right.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, like maybe we have to replace it with something else, like getting a tattoo.
That works.
It stings a bit, but you don't mind because it's for a reason. Like, it reminds me, part of that metaphor is like Nietzsche's, if you have a why, you can endure anyhow.
Yeah.
And part of what they mean is, like, if you've got a reason for doing something, then you don't make a big fuss out of having to endure pain necessarily. So if you were getting a tattoo, it stings, but you don't go about making a fuss about it, screaming and things. And, so the pain doesn't seem intrinsically bad to you. It's trivial relative to the goal that you want to achieve. And so they would say, well, if you want to attain wisdom and virtue, the supreme good.
I mean, exercise still works for that, because we live in no pain, no gain metaphor.
Exactly. That would be, exercise is also a good metaphor. But in the ancient world, it would be a lot more painful going to the doctor, getting bled, leeches, and dentistry can't have been much fun.
I had a root canal done very recently, just on Wednesday actually, and I actually used some Stoic techniques to get through it, because there are a few places where have you ever had one done?
No, I haven't.
Oh, so they do numb you up, right? So it's not pain, but the drill is going in, and you can feel it shaking your jaw, and you get a kind of queasy feeling. It's proto-passion, right? And so you have to remind yourself to keep breathing and all of that. And I was just thinking, boy, if this was 30 years ago,
Yeah.
this would have been just horrible,
Yeah.
you know. But you know, you can get through. I mean, a root canal is fairly a minor thing compared to some of the pain people endure if they have a reason to it. And what's the reason? I don't want to lose a tooth. So, yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of different references to that idea in Stoicism, so these metaphors, I feel also like it's interesting what you say about, you're right, that Stoic rhetoric traditionally downplayed metaphors,
Yeah.
but they do use them. Even the early Greek Stoics used metaphors.
I wonder if that's a shift, though. I mean, Cicero's making a definite criticism and then saying, "Hey, here's how I'm going to do it." He's saying, "Look, the Aristotelians, they're great with this, you know, because Aristotle had his art of rhetoric, and that was one of the things with the Peripatetics. Let's do it as Stoics, and so that's where we get the Stoic paradoxes and the dialogue form, I think." And
I guess he didn't think they did it enough, but they do. Maybe the only bits we remember are the metaphors. They just had a sprinkling of metaphors, and the other 99% of what they wrote. Because there's the dog and the car, and
that's true.
A bunch of other things that go right back to Chrysippus, and you know, there's probably some metaphors that we derive from Zeno. Zeno, the wise man, is like a bull protecting the herd. I believe that goes back to Zeno.
Well, and even the whole logic, ethics, physics, you know, how do we construe the relation to them? That's a metaphor.
They give us a bunch of metaphors about it being a walled garden and stuff like that. Yeah. Maybe they'd be shocked if they realised those are the only bits that we remember. We give them a couple of metaphors, and that's all anyone remembers it. Like,
Travis and I were talking today about, you know, this notion that you've got the basic animal instincts and then with this rational thing on top of it, and it transforms those. And so, you know, you've got self-preservation, but you also got this sort of, you know, sexual desire and our coupling instinct, and how does that get transformed? And we're like, well, you know, there really isn't much in the Stoics that we have, but Zeno wrote a book, you know, on love, you know. We don't know, it's called, I think it's either him or Chrysippus, On the Art of Love. And I'm sure it's not like Ovid's Art of Love, which is a pickup manual.
Yeah.
He wrote a book on marriage, if I remember right.
And Ovid wrote Remedies for Love as well.
Yeah.
How to find a lover, and then how to deal with them problems that causes.
Yeah. But you know, there's all these provinces that, because we don't have the classic literature, we don't know what they had to say on it. You know?
I find myself, I kind of pinch myself every time I say, the Stoics didn't talk about that, and then I think, actually, we don't know 99% of the things that they didn't talk about, so, you know, we should always kind of hesitate before attributing like anything to like that to them, so, you know, saying that they definitely didn't say this, but we don't know, we know so little about them.
Yeah.
But we do have a consistent picture of some of their core doctrines that emerges from I mean, we have a reasonable amount of literature that survives. It's just a small fraction of what there originally was in circulation.
Yeah, sort of synopses. I mean, if you sort of almost triangulate using Diogenes Laertes, Cicero, and Arius Didymus, you see all these consistent doctrines coming up.
Yeah,
you know?
there's a little bit of kind of reconstruction and, like you say, triangulating things between the different texts involved. But I mean, nevertheless, a lot of people who equally, maybe 99% of the people today that went to Stoicism have maybe just picked up Marcus Aurelius and read it. And I think now increasingly, actually, an interesting question about the modern following that Stoicism is developing, I think it's now changing a bit, because probably up until 10, 20 years ago, most of the people that had a passing acquaintance with Stoicism, it would have been through maybe reading the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, and now an increasing number of
You don't think Epictetus' handbook as well?
Maybe. I think the Meditations is a lot more widely read, though. But now it's different because more people have read Buying Holiday or William Irving, and maybe haven't got around to reading Marcus yet, or Epictetus. So there's kind of almost a new generation of people who are interested in Stoicism that are getting it from commentaries. Yeah. It seems to be.
I think that's quite correct too. I see that too with you know, my videos. I'll get people who ask questions, and I'll be like, well, you should read have you read the text? And they'll say, no, I haven't read it, I just watched the videos. And I'm like, you should actually read
Oh yeah.
the text themselves. The videos are only for explaining the text, you know?
To say the same thing a different way, like 10 years ago, nobody really said that to me. You know, like 10 years ago when someone emailed me or spoke to me about Stoicism, I could pretty much assume they'd read a bit of Marcus Aurelius or a bit of Seneca or whatever, and that's why they were into it. And now people say to me, oh, I've got some questions about Stoicism, and I say, well, what do you think of Marcus? I haven't read that yet. Like, you know, the more of them just haven't got around to.
What can we do to get people to steer them into reading, you know, the big three, let alone getting them into reading maybe Cicero or Diogenes, or do you think that's important?
I think it's important. I think what we can do is kind of limited. There's a bunch of things. Like, I mean, our public engagement stuff, like the conferences and the blog and things like that, steer people. You know, every time we run Stoic Week, if I remember rightly, it's certainly at one point, I think still, it has a passage at the beginning of the Stoic Week manual that says, by the way, we strongly encourage you to go and read Marcus Aurelius. Yeah. And it's full of quotes from Epicurus, Marcus Aurelius, and Seneca. So we really, and then there's an appendix that says here are the editions that we recommend. So we're really strongly steering them and helping them to go in that direction. And the other thing that happens is just quoting those texts ourselves. I'm running a course at the moment on Marcus Aurelius. So I've just recently finished running a course on Marcus Aurelius. So kind of producing commentaries on those texts that maybe make them more accessible to people. But that maybe doesn't reach a large percentage. The course I ran, I think it taught people a lot about Marcus's life and character. Yeah. And at the end of it, they said they now felt much more interested in the meditations, much more engaged with it. They were getting more out of it. It became more vivid to them. Maybe that's only a small percentage of people.
Maybe we need companion courses then on Seneca and Epicurus. And maybe we could do one on Cato.
Do you know the funny thing is, it reminds me when I was a student studying philosophy. Here's a little bit of a digression. Yeah. But the way I studied philosophy, it's at a time when people, literary theorists would say, look, a text stands in its own right. Yeah. You don't need to know anything about the life of the author and so on to understand the text. Right?
Yeah, and the analytic people were all saying, arguments alone, don't bother with that stuff too, yeah?
And I just felt psychologically as a student, I found it much easier to study Wittgenstein, for example, if I read biographies of him, and I felt that when I was reading the Tractatus that I could kind of visualise the guy who'd written it, and I knew a bit about his personality. Yeah. It made it more engaging for me, it brought it to life, it helped me understand some of the nuances a little bit, and so personally I feel it helps me a lot to study a subject if I know more about and so sometimes I find that with the Marcus course that I was writing, people would say, well, this is a waste of time, I don't need to know anything about the guy in order to study his philosophy. But the people that did that course said to me they now felt they were engaging with the text at a much deeper level. Partly because just psychologically they felt there was a depth to it because they know the guy, but also some of the passages now took on a new meaning because they could see them within the context of his life.
I like metaphors, and one of the things that I've thought a lot about philosophy and some other fields, it's similar to berry picking. Mm-hmm. You go out in the woods and you get your hands in there and move the leaves around a bit before you see where all the clusters are. Then you pull them out and you're walking along with your thing. And you need a bit of woodsmanship to get through there. You also need to persevere in like not just looking for the ones that are immediately there if you want to have a sort of ripe harvest. And there's you can lay this down in a set of principles, but you really have to bring somebody along, like when you're teaching your kid how to do it. You show them this is how we do it. It's a kind of humble activity, but I think that working with texts is like that. Mm-hmm. Unless you spend time with it, unless you apply other skills, it's not something that can be sort of turned into a routine, mm-hmm. or turned into something that's isolated. So,
yeah, and we, especially once you start looking at the early, the Greek Stoics, there's a lot of reconstruction required.
True, yeah.
Because it's much more, we have major fragments and some pretty cryptic Greek. In places, and some inconsistencies.
And we also have sort of a history at this time of mostly crazy German scholars having some wild speculations about what this and that means.
Yeah.
Sometimes which is determined for one way or another what sort of the conception is of this thinker or this thinker. The Stoics are a great example. There was sort of a pattern in German history of philosophy, which was kind of running the show. The Stoics don't really matter, or the Epicureans. It's Aristotle and Plato that are doing the real thinking, and then because of the decline of the Greek city-state, there isn't that organic. Hegel's a great example of that sort of thing. And you read that, and then you read Stoic texts or even Epicurean texts, and you're like, how did they come to that conclusion? Well, they had some ideas already in mind, and that's where the reading then led to.
Well, we talked about this before, but it's one of those cases where I feel I'm slightly hesitant to sound overly dramatic about it, but maybe if I set that aside for a moment, to a large extent the Stoics preempted modern evidence-based psychotherapy by about 2,000 years. It's a huge deal.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that the fact that people largely ignored the therapeutic implications, not just some of the stuff they said about philosophy, but the actual therapeutic implications of what they said were ignored, not seen as relevant in psychotherapy until the 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
And then only gradually, CBT didn't really establish itself in the mainstream until the 1980s.
Yeah.
In fact, so it's a fairly recent phenomenon. And I promise you, if you'd gone back, I can even remember in the 1990s, a lot of psychotherapists would have been horrified at this sort of advice and thought that it was counterproductive and pretty harmful. To suggest, directly changing or challenging our beliefs.
Well, even look today, there are people who are saying, "Oh, you don't want to experience negative emotions. Don't think about that sort of thing. It's morbid." The positive psychology movement.
There are people. There are some people who will say that, but actually, there's a very large body of evidence in modern psychotherapy that suggests that accepting negative thoughts and feelings with a kind of studied indifference, if you like, or detachment, is absolutely integral to mental health. And the desire to suppress or avoid distressing thoughts and feelings in itself is a critical maintaining factor in clinical depression and anxiety. In general, it's a bit.
Another way that people moving away from sort of psychotherapy, although there have been some psychotherapeutic theorists who would suggest this sort of thing, is like, well, you've got the people, and now you've got society. So, instead of adjusting people to society, let's change society so that people don't encounter, as many hardships and disappointments, and then everyone will be happy. And Stoicism, I think, would say, well, that's a pipe dream to begin with.
And to the extent in which we've done it, it hasn't worked. It hasn't particularly made people happier. Some of the some people the most comfortable lives are the unhappiest people that you'll meet. But the funny thing is, modern treatment for depression particularly I'm thinking of behavioural activation, which kind of grew out of the early cognitive behavioural therapy for depression. Beck's cognitive therapy for depression involved challenging beliefs and so on, challenging automatic thoughts, but also learning to act in a way, change your behaviour so that your daily routine was more fulfilling. And researchers, this is very much a research-driven change in psychotherapy, not a faddish thing. Researchers pulling it apart, doing dismantling studies on it, found that that part alone seemed to be as effective as the whole treatment package, and that it was one of the simplest parts, the easiest to deliver. So and funnily enough, it's a behaviour therapy really rather than a cognitive therapy. So they pulled that out and called it behavioural activation. and combined it with some third wave ideas about the nature of intrinsic and extrinsic values, and they produced something that, well, we've been doing values clarification. Chris and Tim had a workshop on it. Values clarification and valued living, as it's sometimes known, is integral to behavioural activation, like changing your daily routines so that you're acting more consistently in accord with your core values, and becoming clear about what those core values are. Now, that, interestingly, we say there's philosophy and then there's psychotherapy, but at that point in particular, the boundary becomes kind of blurred, because there the therapy consists in Socratically questioning and reflecting on your values, and then attempting to live a life that's more meaningful.
And I would say a key part of that too is, Epicurus talks about something that gets translated in English as contradictions throughout the discourses. But it's really mache, which means conflict. And so we have, when you're talking about consistency, we're kind of a mess, right? You know this from clinical experience as well as personal experience, and a lot of what we're doing in talking about consistency is being able to articulate where there actually is a conflict, and then figuring out, are we going to take A or B, because we can't have both, and we're trying. We've been trying to have both at the same time, and so I think that's being talked about, but in a different language.
Absolutely. In order to work out a consistent, meaningful worldview, you have to do something that resembles philosophical reflection. And funnily enough, you have to do it in broadly the Socratic manner. You've got to kind of like ask yourself questions about contradictions, expose contradictions with regard to what you think are the most important things in life. And values clarification process, all of it is a Socratic questioning process. But it's unlike philosophy in that it doesn't engage with metaphysics and epistemology and these kind of technical things. But it goes back to
you might be able to do without that, though. I think in a lot of cases you can do without that.
It focuses on this, like the Socratic dialogues. What is justice? What is courage? What is piety? These kind of questions.
Well, Plato, Socrates loved to bring in some metaphysics or epistemology, but
But I wonder, to what extent the original Socrates actually did, and
well,
the portrayals.
Look at Xenophon.
Xenophon's Socrates isn't so much like that.
And it's interesting because there's a parallel. Everybody in the ancient world wanted to be somebody else. So Alexander wanted to be Achilles. Caesar wanted to be Alexander. Arian, he wanted to be Xenophon. And he really was. Xenophon gave us a picture of Socrates, and was a military guy and a historian. That's exactly what Arian did.
And Zeno, I'd love to know what Zeno thought Socrates was all about, because he was not that far removed from him. He probably read other accounts of Socrates. He'd studied with the Megarian school, who were descended from Euclid, who was one of Socrates' circle. So they must have had teachings about Socrates that Zeno learned and probably kind of processed and passed down to the Stoics. The Stoics are kind of, in a slightly distant way, they're part of the lineage.
Oh, I think they definitely are. They're almost like bringing together three different Socratic schools,
that's one
in Zeno. The weird one for that, and I don't want us to run out of time on the camera, so we should wrap up soon after this, but is Aristippus. How the hell does he get, pleasure is the only good out of this Socrates guy? And there's some explanations for it that I've never found convincing, but he founds a school as well that gets going, and apparently still had adherents in Cicero's time.
Well, because the other hedonist, although he's very different, Epicurus, is notable for dissociating himself from the Socratic tradition.
Exactly.
He kind of felt it was necessary to do that. So why did the Cyrenaics not feel that why was it that they began as if it was plausible for them to derive hedonism from Socrates, then why did Epicurus have to distance himself so much from it? Maybe he didn't. Maybe he just wanted. He really did just want to present himself as many philosophers have done through history.
As having a pedigree?
An original thinker, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, was it Wittgenstein who said that he...
Oh, you mean Epicurus in that case?
Epicurus
wanted to present himself as an original.
Yeah, I mean, he undoubtedly he read other philosophers,
Yeah.
and, but supposedly he wanted to say that he hadn't really derived anything from them, and it was all his own idea.
Well, there was such, I think there was more hostility to the Epicurean school, and they sort of repaid that in kind early on. You get that sense you've got the Platonists, the Aristotelians, the Stoics, and academic skepticism for a while, taking the academy over. Then you've got the Epicureans over here, and the Epicureans are saying nasty things about these guys, and they're saying nasty things about Epicurus and his followers. And so, you see it down like Cicero's time. Cicero had something good to say about everybody, except those Epicureans.
Yeah, it gets pretty heated, and then Epictetus is pretty scathing.
Yeah.
Seneca, I really feel Seneca kind of pulls the wool over people, because people read the first few letters to Lucilius, and they think, he's kind of conciliatory towards Epicureans.
Yeah.
But as you go through those letters, first of all, you notice that what he's saying is really more equivocal. He tends to say, generally he says that he thinks Epicurus was a wise and virtuous man, sure.
Yeah.
Although, some of his ideas are questionable, he's got some good quotes, as long as you modify them. And behind that, he's insinuating he's actually disagreeing with him at quite a fundamental level.
Yeah.
And also he thinks many of his followers are pretty dubious and has a corrupting influence.
Yeah.
So it's pretty kind of mealy-mouthed sort of phrase. And then in some of his other writings, he's absolutely scathing about the Epicureans.
Yeah.
And sounds like Epictetus when he's slagging them off. It's not this. There's some common ground there between them in terms of this hostility that they have.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, people don't mention this, but actually Marcus is the one that seems more sympathetic. He mentions Epicurus several times.
And not just to Epicurus, but to the Aristotelian tradition too, because he brings up Theophrastus several times.
Well, one of his best friends was an Aristotelian.
Yeah.
And Claudius Severus. And he actually, his son-in-law, his Aristotelian tutor, son was married to one of Marcus's daughters.
Okay.
And he towards the end of his life, when Marcus travelled to Athens for the first time, the son, who was his son-in-law, accompanied him. So he had an Aristotelian philosopher. And then when Marcus was there, he set up funded chairs for Epicurean, Stoic, and was it Platonic?
Platonist and Aristotelian.
And Aristotelian as well. So 4 schools
Yeah.
of philosophy.
And by then the Platonists were back to Plato's doctrines reinterpreted effectively the middle and Neoplatonism.
But kind of consistent with what you were saying, as far as we know quite a surprising amount about Marcus's education in philosophy. He had a Platonic tutor, it's several Stoic tutors, and an Aristotelian tutor. There's no mention
of
any Epicurean in household teaching him, or him attending any Epicurean lectures. The only hint that we have is that Fronto, and this is part of his training in rhetoric, interestingly, Fronto mentions that Marcus was reading Lucretius.
Oh, okay. That would make sense.
But in Marcus's writings, he quotes a letter from Epicurus in Greek, which we don't have another source for. So maybe whether he's paraphrasing or whether he's familiar with Epicurean writings that are lost to us today, but he actually quotes a letter he attributes to Epicurus. But he also does this thing that the other Stoics do. He doesn't criticise them in the way that Seneca and Epictetus did, but he does do this other thing. So it's consistent between all 3 of them. That they say Epicurus is a wise man, he says some profound things, but they kind of need to be modified a bit. He can't just say, I agree with this.
Yeah.
He kind of has to qualify it, but it has to be tweaked.
Yeah. Well, this before we run out, because I don't know how much battery we're going to get, let me thank you very much for this great conversation. We had some excellent conversations over the last couple days as well. Great conference this year, you know.
Yeah,
I always enjoy talking
to Stoicon next year. I mean, I'll have many more conversations. I've enjoyed talking to you about my hobby, Stoicism, our shared hobby.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Donald.
Thanks, Greg.